The alley behind the Cotton Club smelled of rain and gun oil. Bumpy Johnson stood motionless under a single flickering bulb, his coat open just enough for the night air to touch the handle of the .45 at his hip. His hitman, loyal for 7 years, the one they called Red for the scar across his cheek, raised the shotgun with both hands, barrel inches from Bumpy's chest. The hammer clicked back in the silence. Everyone waited for the end of Harlem's quiet king. But something in Bumpy's eyes never flinched. Rain tapped the metal fire escape outside the back room of Rouse like nervous fingers. Red sat alone at the scarred oak table, cigarette smoke curling around the single bare bulb overhead. Across from him, Tommy, Three Fingers Moretti, never took the nickname seriously until you saw the hand, slid a plain brown envelope forward without ceremony. 25 large, Tommy said, voice low, almost bored. Half now. Half when it's done. Simple job. 1 shot. Clean. Red didn't touch the envelope. He kept his eyes on Tommy's face, reading the flicker of unease the Italian tried to hide. Bumpy Johnson had never been a simple job, not for anyone. Tommy leaned in. The old man's losing patience. Bumpy's been cutting into territories too long. Harlem's supposed to be open, not his personal kingdom. You're the only one close enough. The only one he trusts. Red exhaled smoke slowly. 7 years. 7 years of standing shoulder to shoulder in crowded after-hours spots, of catching knives meant for Bumpy's back, of watching the man settle wars with nothing louder than a calm sentence. Bumpy never raised his voice. Never had to. People still listened. You know what happens if I walk away from this table? Tommy continued. You know what happens if I don't deliver? Red finally lifted the envelope. Heavy. Real. He felt the weight settle somewhere behind his ribs. Later, in the dim garage on 135th, he broke open the 12-gauge. 2 shells. Double-Aught buck. Enough to turn a man inside out at 6 feet. He slid them in one at a time, listening to the metallic snap of the action closing. Each sound echoed like a door shutting on something final. Outside, the city breathed. Harlem never slept, but tonight it held its breath. Red pulled the collar of his coat higher and stepped into the wet street, barrel concealed under the long drape of wool. The meeting place was already decided. Behind the Cotton Club. 1 flickering bulb. No witnesses who would talk. He walked toward it like a man going to confession. The rain had eased to a fine mist by the time Bumpy stepped out of the Teresa Hotel that evening. Coat unbuttoned, hat tilted just enough to shadow the eyes, he moved down 7th Avenue like water finding its own level. People parted without being asked. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. A young numbers runner named Calvin spotted him first. The kid straightened like a soldier coming to attention, hand slipping instinctively to the pocket where the day's take sat heavy. Bumpy didn't stop walking. He simply lifted 2 fingers, an old signal, and Calvin fell in step beside him without a word. They covered half a block in silence before Bumpy spoke. "How's your mother's cough?" Calvin blinked, surprised anyone remembered. "Better, Mr. Johnson. The medicine you sent, it helped." Bumpy nodded once. That was all. No lecture about gratitude. No reminder of debt. The medicine had arrived 2 weeks earlier, delivered by a quiet pharmacist who never asked questions. Word traveled fast in Harlem. People understood. Help came without strings when it came from Bumpy. Further down the avenue outside Small's Paradise, 2 men argued over a dice game gone sour. Voices rising, hands gesturing toward pockets. The crowd had already started to form a loose circle, spectators waiting for blood. Bumpy slowed, didn't enter the circle. Just stood at the edge until the shouting faltered, then stopped. Both men turned, saw him. The dice hit the sidewalk and rolled forgotten into the gutter. "Settle it fair," Bumpy said, voice low, steady. "Or don't settle it at all, but not here." They nodded quickly. The crowd dispersed as if someone had turned off a spotlight. No threats, no raised hand, just presence. Bumpy continued walking. Calvin stayed at his side a moment longer. "People saying something's off tonight," the kid murmured. Whispers, Italians moving pieces. Bumpy's stride never broke. Whispers always move before the blade does. Calvin swallowed. "You want me to—" "No." One word. Final. "Go home to your mother. Tell her the cough medicine comes again next week." Calvin hesitated, then peeled away into the side street. Bumpy kept moving toward the Cotton Club's back entrance. The mist clung to his coat like quiet approval. Inside the club, the band played low and slow. Outside, the streetlights caught the wet pavement in long golden streaks. Harlem watched its king walk through the night the way it always had, unhurried, unafraid, and utterly certain that the code he lived by was stronger than any gun pointed at his heart. Red kept his distance, moving parallel through the side streets while Bumpy walked the main avenue. The shotgun rested heavy against his ribs, barrel tucked inside the coat, stock pressed to his side like a second heartbeat. Every step reminded him how close the weapon was to ending everything he had built beside this man. He remembered the first time Bumpy pulled him out of trouble, a dice game in a basement on Lenox Avenue, 1958. Red was 23, hot-headed, already bleeding from a razor cut across the forearm. 3 men had him backed against the wall, ready to finish it. Then the door opened, slow, deliberate, and Bumpy stepped in. No gun drawn, no voice raised. He simply looked at the men until their hands dropped from their pockets. One sentence. "He's with me now." That was it. They left. Red walked out beside Bumpy into the cold night, blood dripping onto the sidewalk, and neither man spoke of it again. But the debt was born that evening. Another memory surfaced as Red crossed 125th Street, staying in the shadows. The night the Italians tried to muscle into the numbers racket. Bumpy invited their representative to a quiet dinner at Frank's Steakhouse. No bodyguards, just the 2 of them at a corner table. Red stood post outside the window, watching through the glass. The Italian talked loud, gestured wide. Bumpy listened, ate slowly, never interrupting. When the man finished his threat, Bumpy set down his fork, wiped his mouth with the napkin, and said one quiet line Red couldn't hear. The Italian's face changed, color drained, shoulders dropped. He stood, shook Bumpy's hand like a man signing surrender, and left without another word. Later, Bumpy told Red only this: "Some wars end at the table, most don't." Now the table had turned. Red paused at the mouth of the alley behind the Cotton Club. He could still walk away. Drop the gun in a sewer grate, disappear into the night, take whatever punishment came. But the envelope burned in his pocket, half the money already spent on debts he couldn't outrun. And Tommy's parting words echoed, "You do this, or we do you." Simple. He checked the street. Empty. The mist had thickened, turning the streetlights into soft halos. From where he stood, he could see the single bulb above the back door flickering, throwing long shadows across the wet bricks. Bumpy would arrive soon, always on time, always alone when it mattered. Red's fingers tightened on the shotgun's grip. The wood felt warm, almost alive. He thought of the scar on his cheek. Bumpy had stitched it himself one night after a bad scrape. No doctor, no questions. Steady hands, no judgment. The betrayal sat heavy in his chest, heavier than the gun. He stepped into the alley. The bulb clicked once, twice, steadying its weak yellow light. Red waited in the dark beyond the glow, barrel already rising in his mind. The bulb above the back door of the Cotton Club buzzed once, then steadied into a dull amber glow. Rainwater dripped from the fire escape, each drop hitting the puddle below like a slow metronome. Bumpy appeared at the mouth of the alley exactly when expected. No early, no late. Coat open at the chest, Hands loose at his sides, he walked straight into the light as though the darkness around it belonged to him. Red stepped forward from the shadow. The shotgun came up smooth, both barrels leveled at Bumpy's sternum from 6 feet away. Close enough that the spread would tear through coat, shirt, skin, and bone in one merciless instant. The metal gleamed wet under the bulb. Bumpy stopped. Not out of fear. He simply chose to stop. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The city noise, distant horns, muffled jazz leaking from the club, seemed to fall away until only the drip of water and the faint metallic creak of the shotgun's action remained. Red's voice came out rough, almost apologetic. "They said it had to be tonight. Said you were finished anyway." Bumpy regarded him the way one regards a familiar room that has suddenly changed shape. No anger, no surprise, just quiet assessment. "You been carrying that weight all night, Red?" Red's grip tightened. The barrels trembled once, then steadied. "I ain't got a choice. You know how they are. They'll come for my sister next, my niece. They don't stop." Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "They always say that. Then they find another reason tomorrow." A bead of sweat traced down Red's temple despite the cold. "I stood with you 7 years, watched you turn the other cheek when any other man would have lit the whole block up. But this ain't about cheek no more. This is about surviving." Bumpy took one small step closer. The barrels stayed fixed on his chest. If anything, the distance made the threat more intimate. "You think pulling that trigger makes you survive?" Bumpy asked, voice low, even. "Or just makes you theirs?" Red's jaw clenched. Memories flashed behind his eyes. The stitched cheek, the shared meals, the nights Bumpy had walked him home after bad deals, never once mentioning the favor. Harlem had seen plenty of loud kings come and go. Bumpy was different. He ruled through what he refused to do as much as what he did. From the street beyond the alley, footsteps approached. 2 men, maybe 3, moving slow. Witnesses, or backup. Red didn't turn to look. His focus stayed locked on Bumpy. "You always said respect lasts longer than blood," Red murmured. "But respect don't pay hospital bills." Bumpy's eyes never left Red's. "Respect pays for the next generation to breathe free. Blood just makes more graves." The shotgun wavered, barely an inch, but enough. Red's breathing came shallow now. Bumpy spoke again, softer. "Lower it, Red, or use it. But whichever you choose, do it knowing exactly who you're becoming." Silence stretched. The bulb flickered once more. Water dripped. Somewhere inside the club, a trumpet held a long, mournful note. Red's finger hovered on the trigger guard. Then slowly, agonizingly, the barrels began to dip. The barrels dipped another inch. Then another. Red's shoulders sagged as though the weight of 7 years had finally settled on them all at once. His finger eased off the trigger guard. The shotgun lowered until the muzzle pointed at the wet pavement between them, raindrops exploding silently on the steel. Bumpy did not move to take the weapon. He did not reach for his own. He simply watched Red's face, reading the surrender the way he had read countless men before, without triumph, without pity. Red's voice cracked on the first word. I can't do it." Bumpy nodded once. Small, almost imperceptible. From the far end of the alley, 3 figures emerged into the dim light. Tommy Three Fingers and 2 of his soldiers, coats open, hands already drifting toward waistbands. They had been waiting just out of sight, insurance in case Red hesitated. Now they saw the barrels down, saw Bumpy standing untouched, and froze. Tommy's face twisted. "What the hell is this?" Red turned slowly toward them. The shotgun came up again, not toward Bumpy, but toward the Italians. One smooth motion. The barrels locked on Tommy's chest from 20 feet. "Walk away," Red said, voice flat. Final. Tommy laughed once, short, nervous. You think you can flip now? After taking the money? After promising? The shotgun roared. Double-Aught buck tore through the night. The blast lit the alley like lightning, the sound slamming off brick walls and rolling down the side streets. Tommy staggered backward, coat shredded, chest blooming dark. He hit the ground hard. The other two men flinched, hands fumbling for guns that never cleared leather. Bumpy spoke without raising his voice. Enough! Red lowered the weapon. Smoke curled from both barrels, mixing with the mist. The two surviving Italians stared at their fallen man, then at Bumpy, then at Red, who now stood beside the man he had almost killed. Bumpy stepped forward, coat still open, hands still empty. He looked down at Tommy once, expression unchanged, then lifted his gaze to the others. Tell your people the message, he said quietly. Harlem stays Harlem. No more envelopes, no more shadows. The two men backed away without a word, disappearing into the rain-slick street. Sirens began somewhere distant. Someone had heard someone would come, but they would find nothing worth reporting. Not tonight. Red stood motionless, shotgun hanging loose at his side. His scar looked raw again in the flickering light. Bumpy turned to him. Go home, Red. Sleep. Tomorrow we talk. Red met his eyes for the first time since the barrels rose. No apology, no thanks. Just a long, silent acknowledgement. Then he walked past Bumpy, out of the alley, barrels still smoking faintly under his coat. The bulb overhead buzzed once more and steadied. The echo of the shot lingered in the bricks long after the men were gone. The sirens never reached the alley. They wailed past on Lennox, chasing echoes that had already faded into the rain. By the time the first patrol car slowed at the mouth of the block, the wet pavement held only scattered brass, a torn coat sleeve, and the faint acrid scent of Double-Aught lingering like a signature. Word moved faster than any radio dispatch. By morning, Harlem knew, not the full truth, never the full truth, but enough. Tommy Three Fingers lay in the morgue with his promises still in his pocket. Red had vanished into the side streets before first light, carrying neither the money nor the shame. People said he took a bus north, maybe Montreal, maybe nowhere at all. No one asked twice. Bumpy walked 7th Avenue the next evening, same as always. Coat buttoned against the chill now, hat low. Calvin fell in beside him again, quieter than before. The kid carried no envelope, asked no questions. He simply walked, shoulders squared a little straighter. At Small's Paradise, the dice game from the night before had resumed, but the circle was wider, the voices lower. When Bumpy passed, heads turned, not in fear, but in something closer to quiet pride. A woman selling flowers from a cart pressed a single red rose into his hand without speaking. He accepted it, tucked it into his lapel. No words. None were needed. Inside the clubs and barbershops that week, conversations shifted. The Italians stopped pressing. Territories redrew themselves on maps no one ever drew. Younger men began to speak of restraint, the way older ones once spoke of flash. Something earned, something heavier. Bumpy never bragged about the alley. He never had to. The blast had said enough. Years later, long after the bulb over the Cotton Club's back door had been replaced and the bricks repainted, people still pointed to that night when they explained why Harlem stayed Harlem. Not because of the gun that fired, but because of the one that didn't. Power, they said, isn't in the trigger. It's in knowing exactly when not to pull it. The smoke cleared. The era held.